Hello and welcome. Another edition of our Corvive Coaches Corner. And today we are going to be talking with the new head coach at Brown University, Frank Holbrook. And Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it. I know you're having a busy fall, but I appreciate your time.
No, excited to hop on here and appreciative for you asking me to do this. So excited to get going.
Let's talk a little bit about, now you're at Brown, you got a great experienced coaching staff that you're bringing in. Talk a little bit about what makes you excited about jumping in and getting things started at Brown University.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the coaching staff. I think that's one thing to get really excited about with Coach Podbelski, Coach McKeon, and Coach Marr. And then we also have a pitching development guy, Coach Pete Kellich, who pitched at Bryant University for Coach Owens. And so it's a great coaching staff. And I think it starts, I'm excited about that, but that didn't just happen, by chance. Administration really listened during the interview process to allocate some more resources to the coaching staff. I feel like that is the biggest thing after coming back from Northeastern and just being a part of such a great coaching staff there with a lot of depth on the staff. That was one of my biggest takeaways was, getting the most out of the players, the team, and the development side of things. Like the more manpower you have and quality manpower, the better. And then also creating situations where you can have some continuity, right? I think if you look at the top programs in the Northeast, UConn and Northeastern, obviously BC's, newer, right, in terms of that coaching staff, but the continuity piece with, Coach Clavin and Coach Cobb, and then at UConn with that staff, I think that is how you build something that's going to last, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that we want to do. This isn't going to happen overnight, right? We're not going to be in the transfer portal bringing in 10 guys a year. This is going to be built through high school players, and to have some continuity moving forward and quality coaches on the staff was a huge priority of mine. And it was great that administration, heard that piece and really stepped up to the plate.
One of the topics I want to digress a little bit about to bring some parents and athletes up to speed. You coming over from a Northeastern Husky program with Coach Glavin, the centerpiece of Northeastern for the last, I'm going to go with 10 years, has always been really you're building from the pitching staff out, meaning you went out of your way to recruit high school arms and develop those high school arms. And then year after year, MLB draft is always taking a Northeastern Husky. Is that going to be are you going to take that philosophy into Brown and really try to be aggressive with the high school athlete within the greater Northeast as well as across the country to build that pitching staff to be that really peak within the Ivy League?
Yeah, no, I don't care if it's the Ivy League, the Little East, the CAA, wherever you are, you're only going to go as far as your pitching staff can take you, right? And that's no shot to the offensive side of the ball, right? You need to have good position players. I think the positional side of things is always kind of like the heartbeat of the team because they're out there every day, but you're not going to go and win championships unless you have the horses and the depth on the mound to do it. So, we have 8 or 9 admission slots a year that we're allowed to recruit with. And I think we're going to be at least half, if not a little bit more than half of every class will be with pitchers, right? 4 to 5 pitchers a year that you can really count on to build the program as kind of the foundation, right? So yes, we will continue to take that approach. And I think as long as I'm coaching baseball, the pitching is going to be always a key priority in terms of getting the right guys on the hill that can give you a chance day in and day out.
One of the things I think parents want to hear from college coaches, and you nailed it earlier, and I want to kind of continue on that dynamic. We keep hearing transfer portal, JUCO graduates, but, really at a school such as Brown, or any school really in the Northeast for that matter, the foundation will always be the high school athlete. How can high school athletes best prepare for that transitional period between their senior year in high school into their freshman fall in college?
No, I think that's a great thing to talk about. I think with our 2026 class, we're already having conversations of what the next 12 months looks like, right? And that's sharing our throwing program, sharing our weight room program so that they're getting a jump start. And, really they have 6 to 8 months to do that so that when they get here, it's not a shock to the system, right? And again, as much as I like to think this will help ease the the transition, and it will, there's no replacement for getting on a college campus and being with grown men and kind of competing in that scene, right? But I think the better the freshmen can do by taking our programs, and doing it at a high level leading up into the summer and the fall, I think we'll allow them to hit the ground running maybe a little bit more smoothly, right? So it's definitely a shock to the system. Every fall, you see these young freshmen in the weight room, and more times than not, they have to adjust and then kind of start to work downhill. But I think if we can get them those programs and like I said, that continuity piece, like you talk about what I saw at Northeastern with, I talk continuity within the coaching staff, but also the support staff. And that comes with athletic training. That comes with, the strength coach, right? I think if you look at Northeastern, Jason Aguiar has been there for over a decade with that coaching staff. Kate Shimoda, the athletic trainer, who's involved with a lot of the arm care and some of that stuff, kind of how they all work together with Coach Cobb and Coach Glavin to really build up a system where kids come in and hit the ground running, right? And I think you look at Avon Cabral, who was a freshman All-American over there, Cam Maldonado, a freshman All-American. That's what's going to allow freshmen to come in and hit the field right away. And I think here at Brown, that's going to be a big priority for us. Is we know this thing's not going to build overnight, right? We can only bring in 8 or 9, players a year who are going to be freshmen, and we're going to build it around our first couple of recruiting classes where we're going to have to play young players, right? And so how can we give them the tools to hit the ground running early in their career? We understand there's going to be lumps, rolling out younger players on the field, but how can you, position them to have really successful careers, but also early in their career to have some success early and then learn along the way of the adjustments that need to be made.
One of the key components to being an active participant at the freshman and sophomore time periods in college is understanding workload management, as far as the length of your day. Whereas with the high school, the length of your day is really just a window in the afternoon. But in college, you have to factor in not only your academic schedule, your strength and conditioning, and then the baseball. But from a baseball perspective, there's a lot more individual as well as team practice dynamics. Can you talk about being able to manage that workload as an underclassman in college and why that's such a pivotal transition piece as an athlete?
Yeah, it's almost like you have a spy on what's going on at Brown. We have a freshman right now who I think work ethic is awesome, right? He's in the weight room 3 days a week with us and our strength coach, but also does some stuff on Sunday. He's always taking extra swings after practice. Like you mentioned, we're lifting at 6 a.m. to 7. The guys are getting breakfast, going to class from 8 to 12, then they're coming down to the field and working out from a baseball standpoint, in the afternoon after classes. And if you're doing extra stuff on top of it, it can catch up to you if you're, kind of overworking yourself. And so we actually had a freshman who I think is going to play a lot and hit the ground running here early on. He's physical, but he had a little back spasm in the weight room the other day. And as he's sitting on the training room table getting evaluated, I said, "Hey, I love that I have to rein you back, right? I'd rather have a kid that I have to pull back rather than pump up to be, getting his work in and getting extra work in." But there's also that workload management piece where you have to have some feel and trust that, you're getting quality reps rather than doing too much and having those diminishing returns. So while there is preparing guys to hit the ground running and be able to do this workload, it's also knowing your body, knowing how to train in a smart way that's going to last over time and be productive in the same way. So really funny that you asked that question, because it's something we're talking through with some of our younger guys, and we love it as coaches taking over a program, seeing young guys push the older guys and want to work and want to do extra, but also it's their first time doing this at probably a full scale level with morning lifts, classes, and then practices in the afternoon, with the volume piece. So very, very good question there. And I think it's something that the players need to work through with our, like I said, athletic training, strength staff. We always talk about continuity within coaches, but also that support staff piece and the education around that's super important.
Well, in today's day and age, we hear a lot of college coaches talking about, physicality and the weight room and things like that. But from a skill set perspective, what type of attributes are going to catch, having been around Eric for the better part of almost 30 years now, knowing the things that he used to look for and knowing what you look for when you're at Northeastern, can you share with parents, it's not statistics. So you're out and you're watching a game. What are some of the attributes, both offensively, defensively, and obviously pitching, that catch your eye over and above velocity and, how far a ball is hit?
Yeah. No, I think obviously makeup's important, right? You want to make sure you're getting a good competitor and a good kid and a good teammate. I think from a, attribute standpoint, we want guys that are explosive on both sides of the ball, guys that can steal bases and also, be in the gaps and over the fence at times, right? And I think when you're looking at players, you're also projecting out, right? And I think body types, if a kid's shaving in his sophomore year of high school and mom and dad are the same size, you probably know that he's probably at the end of his road in terms of some of the physical developments that can happen. And so I think always looking for kids with upside and room to grow. I think we went down to the PBR futures games, and if we're not rolling out big scholarships and NIL packages to some of those top tier kids, they're not even gonna come visit Brown, right? And so I think for us, it's finding that right bracket of kid that really appreciates the education that they're going to get. Also, the fact that we're a new coaching staff, I think in an Ivy League setting, which is different than the rest of college baseball. We're not in the transfer portal, so we're doing it through high school recruiting. We're doing it through developing our student athletes, and then you put on a new coaching staff here at Brown. I think it almost amplifies it even more. Where we're a rare case here, right, in terms of college baseball today, where we're going after that high school kid and looking to develop them. So those student athletes with upside, with grades, who I think at the end of the day are draft picks when they're in their junior, senior year. They're not going to be throwing 94 in high school. We're not getting that kid that's throwing 94 in high school, but maybe the student athlete that's 6'3", lanky, still room to put on some weight on the pitching side of things with a loose athletic arm, and then positionally someone that can really be a dynamic offensive player, right? That's not only just speed and power, but also having competitive at bats, being a good teammate. All those things are the things that we look for. So everyone wants to throw measurables and statistics in people's face, but I think that projection piece is a huge thing for us, so that we're competing at the highest level when these kids are their juniors and seniors. They're as good as anyone in the country.
You touched on a piece that I think a lot of families don't have enough information. And, I was talking with Deck a few months ago about the amount of pitchers or athletes that are coming out of the Ivy League, A, getting drafted, or B, going to do a graduate year at a school like Cornell Danny had a couple guys go to Vandy.
Yep.
Can you talk about, the Ivy League is definitely high level athletics across all sports, but particularly baseball with regard to the Cape Cod League, the New England Collegiate League, scouts, and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the caliber of play at the Ivy League that a lot of families across the country may not be familiar with?
Yeah, I think the top players in the Ivy League are as good as anyone in the country, right? You talk about Jack Oman, who's probably top couple round picks this year. Ryan Oshinsky, who's on our team, he was a first team All Cape guy this last summer. He's been having interviews with MLB teams every other day, it seems like, around here. So the top end talent is really good, right? And it is professional draft picks who are potential top 5 rounders, right? Which is exactly what you want, right? And I think the biggest thing for us, and I think within the Ivy League, is if maybe that depth piece is really where I think you can really differentiate yourself in the league, right? I think everyone, their top third of their roster is really talented and borderline pro draft pick types, right? I think if you look at Columbia and maybe some of those other teams that have been perennially at the top of the league, they have more admission slots, they carry bigger rosters, and I think that was the model at Northeastern, right? Is that you bring in some really good high school talent, you supplement with D3 All-Americans that are coming in and that are draft picks, and it's kind of a foolproof system when you do that. So from our standpoint, I touched on it when we were talking about recruiting kids, is making sure we're getting guys who love baseball, who are great competitors, and really want the best of both worlds. Not only just the academic piece, but also chasing that professional dream and chasing championships. So if we can do a good job recruiting 8 or 9 guys a year that have that type of mindset and makeup and talent, that's when you can really create a depth and a culture of competitiveness on campus. And then I think that translates on the field and within the league and within your non-conference play. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think if you take a close look at the Ivy League, Peter Doobie, who's a senior for us, he had Tommy John 2 years ago. He just signed with Indiana last week. So the talent's real. There's really good talent here. And I think our job here at Brown is to continue to bring in those type of players, and then also the depth within each class, so you can create that culture on the roster of a lot of competitiveness.
One of the things when I'm speaking with families, particularly the student athlete, there's a slight intimidation factor with regard to the academic. piece, like they feel like they're going to be overwhelmed, and
Yep.
they don't know if they can do both the athletic and the academic. Can you talk a little bit about the support staff that a school like Brown offers to the student athletes, not only baseball, but all of the athletes across the
Yep.
board, that helps them be able to manage their workloads
Yeah,
academically?
yeah, we have a great support staff, 4 full-time staff members who that is their focus is student athlete development, especially on the academic side of things, but also mental health and other skill sets to help them, manage and balance the two. One thing unique about Brown is our open curriculum. We're the only school in the Ivy League that has an open curriculum. You do not have to take required courses or core courses. So you're taking courses when you want to and also what you want to, right? And so I think you're building out your own curriculum path and into your major, right? Which allows you to take courses that you enjoy taking and that you anticipate to apply to the rest of your life, which I think creates a healthy dynamic on campus where you're taking things that are really interesting to you. You're also doing, your sport, baseball in this case. And I think it allows for a really good blend of, spending your time doing things you want to do and at a high level, right? And I think when you're forced to do some maybe core courses at other schools, the interest level's not there. Now it feels like a task more than, a development tool, in your life and moving forward in your career. So I think Brown, you look at, they have these happy, mother told me, happiness scores. I guess our students report to be the happiest in the Ivy League, which is great. But I think that open curriculum is a piece that's unique to Brown, and really no one else has that in the league. And I haven't learned of many other schools that have it in general, right? So I think that's a really, really positive things for our guys, that they're doing things that they truly love to do, both on the field and in the classroom.
So the next piece to that is, when do you begin the pre-read process? I talked to a lot of families. They don't understand the timing behind the pre-read. And when you go through that process, when are you officially supporting an athlete's application? Is that during the summer? Is it during the fall of their senior
Yep.
year? Just from a time parameter perspective, can you offer some insight there?
Yeah, I can give you, so we were hired in June. We were a little behind the 8 ball with 2026. I would say most of the league had half of their classes full when we were hired, right? Where we had 0 commitments in the 26 class. So I got hired late June. We have 9 committed guys through supported admission slots, and they were all brought in about an 8-week period, 8 or 9 weeks. So we were getting 1 commitment a week. And then that led into like late August. And that's when we started to put together all the paperwork in terms of, to admissions and transcripts and SAT scores. And then the application piece starts to roll there. From an, supported slot thing, I think we do a really good job, of our coaching staff, Coach McKeon and Coach Podbelski, in calculating the academic index scores. Like that is, that's a standard we're held to, right? I have to average out a certain score within our entire recruiting class. So we're doing a lot of work on our end, and we have great support within our athletic department. We have 2 full-time people, an associate AD, and she has a full-time staff member over her that their focus is just admissions and financial aid, right? So they have an open line of communication with our admissions office. They're reading all of our transcripts. They're sending back us, their projected academic index scores. That allows us to have conversations with the recruits that are very open and honest. And I think the timeline piece is tough now with the 2027 class, because there's only 2 years of academics, right? And these kids are
Right.
getting offers from other schools. We also don't offer scholarship money, so it's all financial aid based. So we can't just say, hey, when a kid comes on campus, hey, you're in, and here's 50% scholarship, right? So I think the timeline is a real discussion that we have with all the recruits we have on campus. There's certain risks that we take on in committing a kid as a sophomore, or his sophomore year summer. If August 1st is the first time you're allowed to talk to a kid, if you're committing a rising junior, his summer going into his junior year, there's 2 years on the table of grades that if they don't hold up their end of the bargain, we're going to be held without, everyone's worried about the student athlete, not getting in. Well, then what about the coaches who take a risk on a kid and they don't hold up their end of the bargain? So I think for us, our approach has just been being super honest with the families and the students and saying, hey, this is where you're at now. We're willing to, use your score that we can calculate with the information we have and offer a roster spot. And then it's the financial piece to use the net price calculator and do some early financial aid reads to get them I guess, to feel good about what they're committing to, right? And so it's not a foolproof system. We committed two guys early on in the process this summer before they really took their SAT scores, right? And those conversations were a little muddy, in terms of, hey, we really love you, we'd love to move on you and offer you a spot. We just don't have all the information, but we're willing to support you, as long as you hold up your end of the bargain. And you look at PSAT scores, you look at other things and their transcripts, and you take a pretty good judgment in terms of that stuff. And I will say, I'm very lucky to have Coach Podbelski and Coach McKeon, because they met with our admissions people first week on the job. They met with our liaisons in athletics. They got all the information they needed, and they can look at transcripts and test scores and calculate some things real quickly on my end so that we can make informed decisions, because I think it's like a puzzle for us. You get one kid with really high end scores, you have baseball needs, and then when the academics come in, it's like, all right, we got this kid who's got a 35 ACT in this, so that allows us to go after this guy, and it just becomes a moving target that's very fluid, and it's a lot of fun and a new challenge.
One of the things that parents are always asking about, is this a money grab to go to this camp, that camp? And I know that, between you and Mike, when you were at Northeastern, the camps played an integral role in talent identification, and then a follow. Is that going to be the same type of process that you have at Brown with regard to what role the camps will play with regard to your recruiting?
Yeah, no, I think even more, right? And I'll explain it a little bit. Where at Northeastern, our roster was comprised of, pretty much 95% all New England kids, right? So all kids that you could see play 7, 8, 9, 10 times, right? And see them in big games and big spots, see makeup, and you know how it is. You go out to see a kid, he goes 3 for 4, he looks great. You go see him the next day, he looks like a totally different player, right? So really having a lot of information and a lot of contacts in this area to really trust people. So I think if you look at our class coming in this year, more than, I would say, just about half is from New England, and then the other half is across the country. And so our contacts in our coaching careers are mostly in the Northeast, right? That's just the honest truth. From Jersey up to Maine, that's really, if you look into our phone contacts, that's where our contacts are. And so now we're building out these contacts throughout the country, and we fly down to Georgia, we see a kid play, he has a great day, but you've only seen him play one day in his whole life, right? And that's where the camps come in for us, is like, we identify these kids, we're flying around the country, seeing kids play once, and now we have to make a decision based off of one day's performance and a recommendation from a guy that we don't have the longest standing relationship with, right? Whether it's their advisors, their coaches, parents, things like that. So I think the camps are huge in terms of getting kids on campus the second time, interacting with them, building a visit around it the day before, the day after, and really getting a good sense of the type of kid you're getting. And I think that plays into what we talked about earlier. If you only have 8 or 9 admission slots a year, you got to feel really good about what you're getting on the other end, in terms of the competitor, the type of kid, and the fit into the team's culture. So I would say the camps are, I don't want to say more important than what Northeastern does, but for us, in that national search, that type of event, I think for kids outside the region, it is a huge component in the recruiting process for us and them. So yeah, it is a huge piece for us.
And now, in closing, somebody watching, somebody listening says, "Boy, oh boy, I love listening to Coach Holbrook. How do I get in front of them? How do you prefer to be contacted? Is it the email piece, the social media piece? What's best for you now as a staff?"
Yeah, so we have an email listed on our website that our staff manages and looks through every day. We got hired in June, and I think we really wrapped our head around that email and the 6,000 unread messages that we had when we got hired, probably in August, right? And so we've cleaned that thing up. We're in a really good place there. I think that is a great point of contact. Obviously, Twitter's great if you're following someone and drop a line there. We're looking up as much video as possible, especially from kids outside of the region, to get a feel for them and what they're doing. So yeah, if you want to reach out through Twitter or through that email on our website, those are the best 2 ways. And then obviously, if you have connections and they know our coaches, feel free to reach out to any of us, whether it's myself, Coach Podbelski, Coach McKeon. You can, really, any of them are just as good as talking to me. So I'm really lucky to have those guys. They do such a great job on the recruiting front. And so if there's a connection there, they can reach out by the cell too.
I want to let parents know again, the Blue Book, create your profile, be able to check in on Brown University for their camps. be able to contact all of the different coaches. We're going to have all that and in the description, both the podcast as well as the YouTube video. Frank, I want to say thank you. I know you're extremely busy, but I greatly appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And if we can ever be of any help, let us know.
Thanks, Walter. Appreciate it.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice.